Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata Chapita, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Twameva Vidya Dravinam, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we are in our third chapter, and the topic we spent quite a bit of time on last week was the renunciation of the sense of agency. Remember our 5 elements that we've been discussing. Act vigorously in the world. How? According to your swadharma, your prakriti, your own inherent nature. How? In the yajna spirit, in the spirit of sacrifice, service to the society, to the Lord. Renouncing our attachment to the fruits of action, and the 5th element, our renunciation of our identification with the sense of agency. All action under all circumstances is done by guna and karma, the qualities of mind and the force of the past as it interacts with society at large. The self is not the doer or the enjoyer. And the phony self, the jiva bhavana, the feeling or the attitude that I'm a person, this chit chaya, the shadow self, has the vanity, I do, I choose, when it's a far more mechanical process. All right, so I think now we're, did you say verse 32 we're on tonight?
Yeah, Jim.
Would you help us out, please, Deepa?
Sure. Ye tve tapyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvajnana vimudhamstan vitti nashtana chetasaha. But those who carp at my teaching and do not practice it, deluded in all knowledge and devoid of discrimination, know them to be doomed to destruction.
Yes, so those people who don't follow this path engage in the world in a different way. They act, of course, probably according to their self nature, but they may not. They may be acting according to what with the psychologists call superego, the waggy finger of parent or society or family. And they engage in activity, and what they want to do is get mine. It's about who has the most cash and prizes. More, better, different, ambition, competition, jealousy, envy. I can remember at one point when former President Trump, I think it was his very first cabinet meeting, he said, "Your job is on a daily basis to help me vanquish my enemies." Some people live that way. It's the opposite of the yajna spirit. And then this incredible attachment to the fruits of action. I'm okay if I win. I'm okay if I get what I want. If I don't get what I want, I'm not worthwhile. My identity, my self-worth is based on the acquisition of stuff, our attachment to the fruits of actions, the outcome of events. And then if I'm identified with the sense of agency, when I'm successful, I'm filled with pride. Look at me, what I have accomplished. I am so powerful. And then if and when that doesn't happen, oh, I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I'm a sucker. I have no worth. And what this does is it increases the vasanas, the mental impressions in the mind, which cocoon, thicken the envelopment around the intellect, so that we become further and further deluded. Next verse.
Sadrusham cheshtate swasya prakrite prakriterjnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a wise man acts in accordance with his own nature. Beings will follow their own nature. What can restraint do?
So even a wise man, even a woman or a man of knowledge at the level of the equipment will act according to their nature. So it's very interesting. Swamiji had degrees in literature and law. He was deeply engaged in politics. He was a freedom fighter during the movement for Indian independence. Then he discovers yoga, goes off to the Himalayas, gets rooted in knowledge, decides that he wants to spread this word to Indians all over. And here he becomes a Jagat Guru, a powerful man, great influence in the Indian culture. He did not leave his nature. People would see him and they'd say, "Oh, he looks like a king." He had a very regal bearing. It's his nature. Now, his teacher, Swami Tapovanam, very humble man, lived in a one-room mud hut with no door, walked in the Himalayas, had 3 kurtas, that was it. So it isn't what's happening on the outside. This is an inside job. So we have stories of avaduts who just wander around with matted locks and long beards. And then we have stories of King Janaka, who ruled his kingdom, fought his wars, etc. So there's no prescribed behavior, job for a woman or a man of wisdom. Any thoughts on this? Now, you're going to do what you're going to do. Prarabdha, you've heard me use that word. Someone comes to me and I make a suggestion, and then they decide, no, I'm going to do blah, 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 blah. And I go, Prarabdha. People have to work out their own destiny, even if it means not necessarily making the wisest choices. So, what's the use of this teaching? No regret, no worry about the future. All the things we've done in the past, even if they were very painful, or we hurt or harmed other people, we did what we did according to our nature. And then it was our nature to become yogis. What about the future? Should I take this job? Have I made a mistake in moving to Portland? You're going to do what you're going to do. It's all was written from the very beginning. What you're doing right here, right now, the cause and effect chain was set in motion with the Big Bang. Does that mean we don't have choice? Of course we have choices. But yoga says, why do you choose what you choose? Any thoughts on this part of the teaching? All right, next verse.
Indriyasyendrasarthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau tayorna vashamagachetau yasya panthinau. Attachment and aversion for the objects of the senses abide in the senses. Let none come under their sway, for they are his foes.
So, raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion. This is a very mechanical process. When the situation is conducive, the mind is happy. When the situation is non-conducive, the mind is unhappy. So the 3 states of the mind, and And your mind hasn't changed. You've just been a little more sophisticated about the way we express it. It's all the mind ever does. So we want to stand back, take on what we call Sakshi Bhava, the attitude of the witness. Watch the mind. And when the situation is conducive, your mind's going to suck its thumb. When things are not behaving the way you want them to behave, your mind's going to, have a tantrum. And what Swamiji always used to say, the way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind. The foolish person plays whack-a-mole with the world. I want to maximize the situations that bring me happiness, and I want to get rid of situations that bring me grief. And it's not a very successful strategy because the world keeps changing and your mind keeps changing. What brought you joy today won't bring you joy tomorrow. So we pull the energy out of the mind. Here, Krishna says, just don't let it come under your sway. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. Just be present to it. And this turns the volume level down on it. So that it no longer becomes such a big deal. So we're not tyrannized by our likes and our dislikes. Any thoughts on this? The ego will say, I'm happy because that's an inherently good situation. I'm unhappy because the situation is inherently bad. And what yoga is saying is, it's merely the force of the past maturing. You determine that this person is a good person because they meet your internal checklist. This person is not good because they don't meet your internal checklist. Conducive, non-conducive environments. Sukham, dukkam cha. Happiness, sorrow. Raga, dvesha. Attachment, aversion. No big deal. Get out. Just watch. Any thoughts on this? Now, there's a practice that's implied here. Usually, when we're in an uncomfortable situation, ego's habit is, I want to get out of here. I want to get rid of them or it. And what yoga says is, do not avoid aversion. I think it was Vishwa was telling me this fabulous story. There's a Swami in the Chinmaya mission who had an aversion to the word fuck. Just really upset him. And of course, the young people were using it. So what he did was sit down and wrote that word on a piece of paper 108 times. It's just a word. It's just a word. He moved into it rather than avoiding it.
Did you read?
Any thoughts on this? Now, if we're in a difficult situation, my suggestion is to hang with it until you've reached a place of neutrality. So if it's problematic at work, for example, don't be in a rush to quit because you're uncomfortable. Why am I uncomfortable? What's going on? And be awake, be woke as to what am I, where's my aversion? Where's my trigger? All right, next verse.
श्रेयान् स्वधर्मो विगुणः परधर्मात् स्वनुष्ठितात् स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेय परधर्मो भयावह. Better is one's own duty, though devoid of merit, than the duty of another well discharged. Better is death in one's own duty. The duty of another is fraught with fear, is productive of positive danger.
Yes. So if you find yourself having a particular nature, what you love to do, and it doesn't feed your ego needs, even if you're not particularly very good at it. Here, Krishna is saying it's better to do that than to try to do something that's contrary to your swadharma, even if you're good at it. I have a friend, a dear friend, and ever since he was a young kid, he's loved music and he's loved the theater. But because of a lot of external pressures, he thought he needed to go into a profession where he would be safe, secure, make a lot of money, and have status. So he went and got an MBA from Cal and went into the field of finance. And even though he was relatively good at it, I've known this guy, 20, almost 30 years. He never enjoyed it. And he'd always have problems. He'd get fired from jobs or storm out, where it was just soul crushing. And when he was in between jobs, next thing you know, he's on stage somewhere and loving it. So I always thought that here's a fellow who didn't have the courage to follow his swadharma. So it was fraught with fear. It was productive of unpleasant results. Another place where we can see this very clearly is for people who are gay or lesbian coming out of the closet. Many gay and lesbian people, because of social pressures, family pressures, religious pressures, for example, try to be straight. They may get married, they may love their spouse, they may have children, but they're going against something that's inherently authentic about themselves. And usually at some point in life, there's a blow up. They come out. Now that has its own issues, but there's a level of authenticity about that. And I can give all sorts of worldly examples. the longer you put off living according to your swadharma, the more difficult it will be. I remember having a discussion with a person, and he was just so dissatisfied with his life. And I said, one of my standard questions, well, if you were independently wealthy and you had all the education and training in your life, what would you be doing? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, when was the last time you really did something you really enjoyed because you enjoyed it? And it was so sad because he said, well, when I was 5, I used to like to finger paint. And that may have been the last time he acted in the world out of the joy of creativity and self-expression, stuff like that. I was talking with another young man today, and he's a composer. He wants to go back to graduate school, get a doctorate. Lots of fear. Am I good enough? Da, 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 da. And, in the conversation, he was talking about how he just has to do music. Well, he may not be rich and famous, but if he feels I've just got to do it, this is what I'm here to do. Very clear. Very clear. Any thoughts on this idea?
Jim, I have a question. This is Sangeeta. Hari Om, Jim.
Hari Om, Sangeeta.
I'm back. I have a question on this, following the Swadharma. If someone's authentic self, for whatever reason, leads him or her to do evil stuff, like Trump has his own dharma that he's practicing clearly. What do you say about that? Or what about the mass murderers? I mean, they're following what comes, that's their authentic self. What happens?
Well, what you do is if you take those proclivities and you follow those 5 stages, you'll find that in God's hands, our worst defects can become assets. So I'm just being hypothetical here. Let's say that you have a tremendous propensity for violence. Okay, here's a real life one. I have been told that Mahatma Gandhi had the astrological chart of a murderer. I don't know if it's true, but he spent his whole life dealing with his own propensity for violence. But what he did with that is he chose to transmute that into a life committed to non-violence. And of course, he died by violence. So there are ways to take these proclivities and find ways to work with them in ways that are not destructive, if you're conscious. Now, Trump can do no other than be Trump. He's a very tragic figure in many ways, in my opinion.
But
incredibly tragic figure.
In a messed up way, isn't he following his dharma? I mean, he's being his authentic.
He's acting according to his nature. He can do no other. You're absolutely right.
So isn't that his, I don't know.
So far, now, I believe that redemption is possible for anyone. Who knows what a horrible failure may do to this man? It may turn his head and his heart in another way. I firmly believe it. Out of our suffering frequently can come redemption. Have you ever seen the play or the movie Dead Man Walking?
Yes.
There's a clear example of it. This was a fellow who was a murderer. He followed his swadharma, capital offense, going to the death chamber. But within that was redemption for him in his relationship with Sister Brajan. So we never know how these things may or may not work out.
If I may just follow up on that, because I think when the passage was about follow your own swadharma, do not follow others, no matter how meritorious that might be. So in that sense, if you have a proclivity to killing people or be like Trump, then is the Gita saying go forth on that road rather than trying to be a better person?
No, because if you want to be a better person, that's also your swadharma.
I see. Okay.
What it's saying here, first of all, hypotheticals by and large are not too fruitful in this work. I always, again, come back to we can't do other people's yoga, we can only do our own. But many times, for example, I've seen people enter into spiritual life. They may want to take sannyas, become brahmacharis or brahmacharinis, and that's really not where they belong. But they want to be close to God. And they think living a particular monastic life, an ascetic life, is how you do it. People who in the West become priests or nuns or monks, thinking that in and of itself is what's going to do it. And if that's not your nature, if you can't live that life easily and gracefully, I look at my friend Vilasini Balakrishna. She took the brahmachari training course. She was Swamiji's personal assistant for 2 years plus when she was a young teenager. But she decided that her swadharma was to get married. She fell in love with this boy, Suresh. And she teaches Vedanta. She revels deeply in the self, but she's a householder. She had a career. She has a beautiful house in St. Augustine with a swimming pool, That's her swadharma. It wasn't given her to become a swamini. But again, Sangeeta, the main thing to do is to tell the truth about where are we? And of course, it can shift through life. We don't have to do the same thing through our whole life. This is my 4th career. Was this useful?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Next one.
Arjunuvacha atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi varshenya baladiva niyojitaha. Arjuna said, but impelled by what does man commit sin, though against his wishes, O Varshnaya, constrained as it were by force?
So again, the word here is papam, sin. It's not like the Judeo-Christian notion of sin. Violating God's law, you've committed an abomination. No. For a yogi, any endeavor, gross or subtle, meaning a way of acting in the world or a way of thinking, which serves to purify the mind, we call punya, merit. Any endeavor, gross or subtle, that has as its result the grossification, the thickening of the mind, we call papa. So the extroverted life of the yogi, in the end, thickens and grossifies the mind. Those who have an addictive relationship with the world. That's papa. Now, what Krishna is talking about is something every yogi goes through. So you may hear the teaching of the Gita where, oh yes, he suggests that we all give up our attachment to the things of the flesh, worldly pursuits. And then, as St. Paul says in his letter to the Romans, I do that which I would not do, and I do that which I hate. Therefore, it is not I that do it, but sin that is lodged in my limbs. All of us have had the experience that at the level of the will, the level of the intellect, we say, I'm going to do ABC. I'm going to stop doing X, Y, and Z. And we find we can't. We do what we've said we're not going to do. And we don't do the things we really want to do. Am I the only one who's ever suffered from this? It's the human condition. So Arjuna's question is, what makes us do that? What makes us have this internal dissonance where our willpower seems absolutely wimpy? What we have is a condition of spiritual impotence. And we engage in activities that further grossify the mind. And we don't do the activities that we know will bring us happiness. Anybody out there in Zoom land unfamiliar with this condition? Let's see what the Lord answers. Next verse.
Shri Bhagwan Uvacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajo Guna Samudbhava Mahashano Mahapapma Vitthaye Namiha Vairinam. It is desire, it is anger.
This is what the blessed Lord answers. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. Yeah.
The blessed Lord said, it is desire, it is anger born of the active, all devouring, all sinful. Know this as the foe here in the world.
So the word is kama, usually translated as desire. Actually, some texts, English texts, will translate it as lust. I like the translation craving. We all know the difference between a preference. I would rather have this, but it's not a big deal if I don't. Or I must have this. Absolutely. Having this, that, or the other thing is necessary for my happiness. It's interesting when I talk with people who have a more psychological approach to the world. One of the phrases I hear, which I just find fascinating, well, I'm not getting my needs met. Have you heard that before? What in God's name does that mean? Do you have a place to live? Yeah. Are you starving to death? No. Are you sick? No. You're getting your needs met: food, clothing, and shelter. Everything else is somewhere along the gradient between preference and obsession and addiction. They are not needs. That is a falsehood. And it is our craving, our insistence, our attachment, kama, craving, vancha, wanting, spreha, longing, trishna, thirsting. Scriptures use all sorts of very vivid words to talk about this condition. I'll be happy when. It'll be better if. That some person, place, thing, or condition is going to make all the difference. Or I need to fix me. I'm not okay the way I am. That's kama, craving. And its inevitable result is krodha, anger. So let me give you yoga's definition of anger. If you find yourself angry, it is caused by a thwarted desire or an unmet expectation. It's an interesting definition. When you get angry, go back in your memory. Think of when you've gotten angry. Why did you get angry? It's thwarted desire or unmet expectation. It's an expectation. I like the definition. It's a resentment under construction. Don't I have reasonable expectations? You can have a reasonable expectation, but the yogi wants to be able to drop it when it's not met. If I'm not getting what I want, I'm going to be angry. And this is where the lip Vedanta, the person who studies scripture and who goes to lots of satsangs, listens to a lot of Mahatmas, but still has a miserable life. Why? Kama, krodha. It is craving. It is attachment. And its offspring, krodha, anger. This is what causes our destruction. Any thoughts on this?
I was also thinking that sometimes my anger comes from getting something that I don't want.
Well, you had an expectation of getting what you wanted and you didn't get it. You got something you didn't want.
True.
We don't need to parse it. The point is, it is the inevitable fruit of craving and attachment and expectation when it gets thwarted.
It is about expectation.
And attachment. Ego will say, I'm angry because they done it to me. Yoga says, I am angry because I didn't get what I want. I'm attached to a position. I'm identified with an idea of self. Don't you know who I am? Nobody treats me that way.
The other thought I just had that as you were just speaking just now is something you mentioned already. My spiritual director mentioned something to me about going around trying to get my needs met, reacting all over the place, while I'm trying to get my needs met because of a paranoia of being taken advantage of.
Well, and see, the person who's internally taken the vow of poverty, in Sanskrit we would call that sannyas, renunciation. Nothing is mine to own, everything is mine to use. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord, it says in Job. Then you can never be taken advantage of, because nothing is yours. There's a wonderful scene in the movie Gandhi that I just love, where the Brits in charge say, arrest him. They drag him off and they put him in jail. Well, Gandhi was a great renunciate. So he's there in jail and he's wearing his little diaper and he's spinning his homespun cloth and he's got his little glasses and his books. And he's quite content. They could put him inside a room called a jail, but they could not imprison him. Does that make sense? And if inside we take that vow, the internal vow, you don't have to change anything on the outside. And then there's that wonderful story of the fellow who comes to Jesus and they have the conversation about which is the greatest of the laws. And Jesus says, you are close to the kingdom of heaven. Go, sell all that you own and come and follow me. Remember that story? And the fellow goes away with a heavy heart because he was a man of great wealth. So the deep mysticism of that. Can you come to that deep place where God and the human being are one? This Christ consciousness. if you're attached to stuff.
I think I'm thinking more about other things in the world, such as maybe going into a car dealership that I bought a car at and trying to get them to fix it when it's broken and not being able to get my needs met, that type of thing. It's not about not getting material that's extra that I might desire, but more about just getting my true needs met.
Well, no,
That
your desire is to get the car fixed. That's not a need. Now, what I would recommend is if you have a difficult time being assertive with people in a car dealer, ask for help. For God's sake, take a friend. That's what I would recommend. That's a simple thing to do.
Yes, I have recognized that it's about being alone. So I have to bring my mother to the doctors with me. I have, because
And
people,
so what? So what? Who says we have to be alone? Who says we have to be so strong? That's a nice idea you can let go of. I'm legally blind. I have macular degeneration. The great lesson from this is I have to ask for help all the time, and I live alone. I walked into Whole Foods today, so I go up to one of the people and I say, "Pardon me, can I borrow your eyes? Can you grab a big box of spring mix for me? Because I don't want to handle all the boxes in COVID." If I'm getting on a bus, I have to say, "Pardon me, is this the 51 or the 12? Or an absolute stranger, "Pardon me, can you tell me when it's safe to cross the intersection?" What I've had to do is just get over my cheap self. I have to ask for help. No other way. Luckily, people are really nice.
Jim, can I ask a follow-up question to what Ellen's been speaking about? Like,
Sure.
it's one thing to have an expectation and not have it be met, but what would you say when the expectation is of integrity in the other person that you interact with, of
Oh,
some?
yeah. Well, many of us have a hope that the people out there in the world will behave with integrity, and some of them don't. Now, I'm not saying you don't hold people accountable for their behavior, but that's no reason to get upset. That's the point.
Hmm.
So if the dude at the car dealership wants to rip you off, and you have an intuitive sense this is not an honest person, and you know that you get flustered and confused and you're not good at being assertive in those things, like I said, bring a friend who has those qualities.
people do tend to respond differently when there's another set of eyes watching, but I can't always have that. So I have to have some way, to not take it personally when the secretary's at my doctor's office, yeah, to not, to be mature, to not react. And I really have to pause and I
Yes,
have to, yeah, my only defense is a higher way of living. And it's so
absolutely.
hard.
It's never personal. If the gal in the doctor's office, that's a sexist comment. It could be a male secretary. I apologize. If the person at the doctor's office is just not cooperative, believe me, you're not the only one that they're not cooperative with. The next patient's going to have just as much trouble, probably. It's never personal. Make peace of mind your most prized possession. No, nobody out there, nothing out there is important enough to get upset over. And that's like an interior choice. Once we get that, whatever happens, I'm 72 and I'm diabetic. I should be getting my COVID vaccine. I'm not. Kaiser's giving me the runaround. Well, my downstairs neighbor's only 71 and she got it. I have friends, they're going nuts over this. I'll get it when I get it. Doesn't mean I don't take the actions. I call Kaiser, the number, the COVID information number, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to lose my serenity over it. It's not, nothing is that important.
And even more so, I don't want to react and become immature and angry because I give my power away. And I find that I'm wasting my energy by doing, and then I'm really mad at myself. So I have to.
That does no good either. No regrets. We do what we do. We always do the best we can. And it's in these sorts of things about learning how to be a yogi in the world, it's always progress. It's like trying to count to the highest number. It's always something new to learn about our character, about the mind, about the world. I want to make sure that somebody else has a chance to ask a question. I kind of want to spend the whole rest of the time talking about just this one issue. Who is that who I've been talking with? Because I can't see you. Hello, what's your name?
Ellen, your
Oh.
mic's muted. Yeah. there
Oh,
we
I'm
go.
sorry, I was muted. My name is Ellen. I'm from the Boston area.
Hi, Ellen. Welcome.
Hi, thank
Well.
you.
And just put this stuff on the shelf. Put this stuff on the shelf. But again, this whole idea of needs. You see, as soon as I use the word need, then it becomes insistent. I have to have this. It's a need. And that's really not necessarily true. That's something we get to look at. Anybody else have another question before we go? I think we can do one more verse.
I have a question, Jim. This is
Who's
Mark
this?
Grover. Mark
Hi,
Grover.
Mark.
Hi. A lot of the verses thus far are based on the assumption that you know your Swadharma. And my question is, how do you find your Swadharma, and how do you know when you have found it?
Excellent, excellent question. What you have to do is turn your mind away from things like, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. Or, oh, that would be so cool to own my own business, etc. And pay attention to what you enjoy doing. And for young people, what I encourage people to do is experiment with things. Now, you're at a time in your life where you've got a career going, but do you feel a bit disaffected from your career? Is it really just not floating your boat?
No, I feel good. I just sometimes fall in my career and have challenges. And
Well, welcome to the world. Of poor Arjuna's got an older brother with a gambling problem. How do you think he felt? You did what? You lost the whole effing kingdom. That's a problem. No, it doesn't mean it's smooth sailing all the time. And it doesn't mean we don't have distasteful things to do. But what do you do, Mark? I forget.
I have my own business. It's a small business.
And what do you do? What's your business do?
It sells computer software.
Okay, so I suspect that a whole lot of your time is also doing things like cost analysis and profit and loss things, and dealing with the business part of it rather than just the software part of it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and that may not be the most fun part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of the job. When I was a musician, a church musician, now I loved having orchestras and conducting and singers and stuff like that. But, you know, every month before Easter, every month before Christmas, hours and hours and hours of putting music into binders for singers and musicians. And no one else could do it because I'm the one who knew what I wanted. You know, I want this particular trumpet descant for this particular hymn, you know, that kind of thing. And it was tedious. I'd have to spread out, 25 or 30 notebooks. Take me a month to put all that together. Not my most favorite part of the job. It comes with the job. So none of our swadharmas, are all of them have distasteful things about them. But it's talking about a larger picture. Now, for example, I've known people who've tried to be self-employed because they thought that's what they wanted because all their friends, were starting their own companies. And the truth is, they really liked the peace of mind that came from getting a regular paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if your business is beyond that stage, but a lot of people who are self-employed and starting their own business, there's a huge swing in income.
Mm-hmm.
Is your company more stable than that at this point?
No, it's pretty new. It's a couple months old.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
And bleeding money right and left.
Yep.
And then going out and try to do, getting investors.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe most people I know hate that part of it. So every job has its distasteful parts. There's no avoidance of that. No avoidance of that. But overall, anybody else have a question?
Thank you, Jim.
I'm just going to make a brief comment about that, the job and all of that. My job is to work for God and to live by spiritual principles on this earth.
Yes.
And, that's our real, we're looking for a purpose, and that's the one that fills my heart. My heart needs, and so my job for money, that's just to put food on the table. So I can work for, and it's also another place for me to live by spiritual principles and I can enjoy it and all that. But my real purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service to God and those about me. And I believe that when more of us, and I'm not perfect, believe me, at it, but I try to do that. I know what my purpose is. I'm so grateful for the 12 steps. I'm so grateful that I drank but we don't have to have that in our history to find, and whatever our spiritual path is, I believe it's to live that in this earth. And when more people are doing that, things like viruses and that kind of thing go away.
I think you're right. And I think from the standpoint of a person's work in the world, it can be far more than just putting food on the table. And that's what Krishna is talking about here.
And we all have this social instinct. So I'm the baker, Sam down the street is the doctor. You know, we all have a way it is part of our social instinct, what we do, you know, quote, do to earn a living. That's part of, you know, what God gave us our instincts for. I want to put the horse before the cart. So when I'm doing the inner purpose, you know, the spiritual purpose, everything else will work out.
Well, and actually, in the earlier part of the chapter, we covered that very same idea, because it's a universal idea, although it's so beautifully put in the 12 steps as well. Good point. Very good point. All right. Well, I think, what verse are we on, Deepa?
You have to start 38 next time.
Okay, so next week, probably for sure, we'll finish up chapter 3 and begin chapter 4. So we'll have 20 minutes now of silent meditation. Namadha Purnamidham Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Thank you all, and thank you, Deepa, for chanting. Ellen, are you still here?